Artemis Suites, 1955. I was working in the lighthouse today, Sam said glumly. Sam Lutz was tired. His back ached, and he sat beside his wife and watched their daughter play beside the family bunk beds. Sam and Mariska Lutz were sitting on their bottom bunk in the crowded number 6 of Artemis Suites, a suite intended for a few people, but which the Lutzes shared with 9 other families. They ignored the argument and bustle and jostling from the rest of the apartment and watched Marshka playing on the floor by the bunk bed with 2 stiff little dolls Sam had made for her from scrap wood. One of the dolls was a boy, one a girl, and little Mashka, a pale, black-haired child with flashing black eyes like her mother, was making them dance together.
La la la, the rapture of rapture, your heart it will capture, oh la la la,
she sang, her reedy voice providing the music for the dance. Some song she'd heard piped over the public address in one of the atriums.
It was good you could get the work, Sam,
Mariska said as she watched Mashka. Her diction was good, she'd taught English in Prague, but her accent was thick. They'd met when Sam was stationed in Eastern Europe after World War II. Circumstances had made it almost impossible for her to marry him and go back to the States, but in '48 they were approached by a recruiter from Rapture looking for Atlantic Express laborers. It was a way out of the wreckage that was left after the war, a way out of the U.S. Army. Only Rapture wasn't an out. He felt trapped here. The work had finished up, and Sam got laid off, and he'd been summarily informed he wasn't allowed to leave the underwater colony. There was beauty in Rapture, sure, but people like Sam didn't have much chance to appreciate it. It was like Sophia Lamb said. Most people here were like the backstairs servants in a palace. Yeah, I needed the work, sure, Sam admitted. But it was just 2 days' worth, not enough to get us out of here. Need enough to get our own place in the Sinclair Deluxe, at least.
There are some rooms they don't use behind Fighting McDonough's. Elaine told me about them. Maybe they would let us have them cheap. The McDonough's are nice.
Maybe, but not sure I'd want the girl there. McDonough's night manager hires out those rooms to women from Pauper's Drop. Desperate women, if you know what I mean.
And is it so much better here?
No. Then, realizing that gloom could be catching, he smiled and patted her hand, leaning close to whisper,
Someday, I'll take you home to Colorado. You like Colorado. Maybe someday.
She twined her fingers with his, looking nervously around.
Best not to speak of such here. We have food and shelter now.
Sam snorted. He looked at the other people, shuffling back and forth in the close, malodorous suite. And all the other rooms and suites in the Artemis building were just as crowded, just as prone to tension. Little Toby Griggs appeared to be arguing with big, chunky Babcock again. Something odd about those two. It was as if in a moment they'd transform into 2 cats, arching their backs and hissing. Then Babcock turned and walked away between the bunk beds. Griggs followed. There were 2 rows of bunk beds in what should have been the living room. 7 more against the 2 long walls in the bedroom. Junk piled in the corner, not enough storage. He hoped the toilet wasn't plugged again, smelled like it might be. And someone had been putting graffiti on the walls. Ryan doesn't own us, it said. Become the body of the lamb. That would have to come down before the constables saw it.
Oh, if you were in the lighthouse,
Mariska said suddenly.
You saw the sky. That must have been nice.
Her eyes were wide at the thought of seeing the sky again. Yeah, I only had a few seconds to look at it. They had us busy fixing the entry bathysphere. We had to bose up 300 yards of steel spool to set it in place. Not easy with just 3 of us and only a hand-cranked winch. And it was cold up there in the lighthouse shaft. It's winter on the surface. I remember crossing this ocean in a troop ship this time of year. Cold as hell, and the waves higher than the ship. All of us seasick. He made a mental effort to force memories of the war out of his mind. It was helped by Toby Griggs and Babcock arguing loudly on the other side of the bunks. He tried to ignore them. You had to screen most people out in these conditions if you wanted to stay sane.
Did you hear anything? Up there in the lighthouse?
She asked.
I mean, maybe ships passing or gulls or...
You know what I heard up there? Icebergs. We heard one of them banging on the lighthouse. Boom. Big old clanging echoing sound. What a noise.
I'd like to go up and look sometime, she said wistfully, if they allowed it.
Oh, Jesus, I'm sorry I brought you down here. They made it sound so good. She kissed him on the cheek. Her lips seemed deliciously soft to him after dealing with the cold, hard metal all day.
Milrige,
she whispered, Shek for I love you. Me too, kid, he said, putting an arm around her shoulder. She was a small woman, nestling easily against him. Around the crowded bunk room, people muttered and argued and bitched in 3, maybe 4 different languages. The sing-song of Chinese, the bubbling flow of Spanish, and especially the sarcastic brassness of Brooklyn English.
What are you doing with your boots under my bunk over here, yeah? I look like I got room for your shit under my bunk, for crying out loud?
Somebody fucking stole the last of my scented fucking soap. You know how hard it is to get that shit? It's probably you, Maury.
The fuck it was. Somebody got into my lockbox. I had my last Eve hypo in there and it's gone.
What are you talking about? You're the one that stole my plasmids. I had a new skills I was gonna inject for the job tomorrow.
Frightened by the shouting, Mashka came to sit with her back against her dad's legs. She made the little dolls clack together, singing loudly to drown out the sound of all those heated voices.
La la la, the rapture of rapture, your heart it will capture. Oh, la la la.
Someone in the far corner shouted, but Sam couldn't make out what they said. He caught a flash, heard a crackle, smelled ozone, a shout of pain, and a flare of blue light. A ball of fire sizzled across the room between the bunks and charred the wall on the left.
Mama, Daddy,
Mariska whimpered, climbing onto the bed behind them to peek over her mother's shoulder.
What is it? Someone's messing with those plasmids,
Mariska whispered, her voice choked with fear.
They're way over there, little one, on the other side of the room. We'll be safe here.
Stay at the bunk, Sam told her firmly. Mariska tried to hold him back, but he pulled away. He had to know what was going on. If they were throwing fireballs, the whole place could catch. Plenty of flammables in Artemis. They were a ways from the doors to the suite and could surely burn alive before they got out. A mighty peculiar way to die, considering they were deep underwater, but he'd heard of men burning alive in submarines in the war. He moved carefully to steal a look around the corner of the Ming family's double bunk and saw the 2 men quarreling in the far corner of the room near the row of circular blue-lit ports looking out into the sea.
Just get out of my face or the next one will toast you, Griggs,
Babcock shouted, jabbing an angry finger at the smaller man. Babcock was a tall man with fat cheeks and patchy hair, greasy coveralls. He had one of the odd skin reactions people got from plasmid use, this one on his scalp, making an ugly mesh of red welts. Part of his hair had fallen out around it. Toby Griggs was squared off with him, a puny fox-faced fellow, hair slicked back. He had a tart way of talking and a lively sense of humor. Sam had always kind of liked Toby for his spunk. Toby worked as a salesman in one of the shops off Fort Frolic, and still had his wrinkly green and black checked suit on.
Back off, or I'll electrocute you, Babcock,
Toby crowed as energy crackled between the fingers of his raised right hand.
I'll strap you to the electric chair standing up.
Sam wasn't surprised that Toby had spent his paycheck on a plasmid from Fontaine Futuristics. Toby had been talking about how a good plasmid could be an equalizer. He was a little guy and didn't like to be bullied. But Babcock had always seemed level-headed. And he had 2 small girls to think of, plump little twins, yet there was Babcock using incinerate, making a ball of fire appear in his hands. Toby Griggs had a look in his eyes that made Sam think of a rooster back home on the ranch about to jab a rival with its beak, that mean glitter in its little eyeballs. As for Babcock, it looked to Sam like the mesh of red welts on his head was pulsing in rhythm with his angry panting. A wavery column of hot air rose from the fire flickering over Babcock's hands. Strange that the flames emanating from his fingers didn't burn them, but plasmids were like that. It seemed to Sam that heavy plasmid use made people into something like rattlesnakes, not hurt by their own venom. Toby and Babcock danced around each other, teeth bared, wild-eyed, drool running from the corners of their mouths, energies simmering in their raised hands. To Sam, their threats sounded like babbling. They were barely aware of what they were saying.
Threatening me, Babcock? Is that right? Is it? I'm tired of you big slobs pushing me around. What do you think I paid good money for this plasmid? I may not eat for a week, but I have power to keep plug uglies like you from throwing your weight around. I'm a new man, I can feel it, and no one can screw with me now, Babcock. Back off or die.
Die? Me, I can burn you to a cinder. I swore I'd defend my family against anyone who threatened them, and I'll do it.
No one's threatening your family. You've been getting nutty from the moment you got that plasmid,
Tony snarled.
You can't handle it. Maybe you took too much Eve and not enough Adam. You don't know what you're doing. You're nuts, Babcock. Batty Cracker's crazy. Back off or I'll put a charge in you that'll turn your head into a 1,000-watt light bulb.
How are you gonna do that when you're burned up cinder, Griggs? Huh? Answer me that.
Fire whirled relentlessly, roaring in Babcock's hands as if it were eager to destroy. Toby Griggs growled to himself and took the offensive. He twisted his shoulders about, grimacing with insane concentration. Electricity writhed from his fingers, crackling through the air at Babcock, just as Babcock's wife, a pudgy, mousy-haired woman in slippers and a loose blue frock, came rushing up to him on her short legs, throwing her stubby arms around him.
"No, Harold," she yelled. "Don't do that. She'll get us killed."
Then she let out a pealing shriek as the electrobolt struck her and Babcock at once. An extra big bolt of blue-white lightning. Everything Toby Griggs could summon up. Onlookers screamed as Babcock and his wife went rigid. The two of them were doing an absurd little dance together, locked in a fatal embrace as the current raged through them, sparking blue from their bared teeth. Miss Babcock's hair stood on end. Her dress caught fire. Their eyes smoked and then boiled. Out of their heads, their faces contorted. The charge burst and sparks flew into the walls and floor as Mr. and Miss Babcock, flesh fused in a grotesque mock of marriage, fell in a limp, smoldering heap.
"Oh my God,"
Sam muttered, staring at them.
"They're dead. Toby Griggs, what have you done?"
Y'all saw it,
Toby said shrilly, backing away from the gathering crowd between the bunks.
He threw a fireball at my head. He was raving, completely out of his gourd. He was on a plasmid high. He can't handle his plasmids. And then he tried to kill me.
Then Toby bolted, dodging past grasping hands out the front door of the suites. Two little girls, the 5-year-old Babcock twins, came tiptoeing up together, clutching each other in life as their parents clutched each other in death.
"Mom?"
quavered one little girl.
"Dad?"
quavered the other. Two little girls, all alone now, orphans. Two little sisters. Fontaine Futuristics. Rapture. 1955. "We have too few sea slugs," said Bridget Tenenbaum, squinting into a microscope at a dead gastropod as Frank Fontaine entered Lab 23. These new research digs were better, roomier with ports and windows, levels, and a balcony walk looking down on the central concourse of Fontaine Futuristics. Tenenbaum turned, frowning thoughtfully to Fontaine. "Only special gastropod works for Adam mutagen and base for Eve. And these, all gone." "We'll have to cut back plasmid production," Fontaine said gloomily, looking at the remaining sea slugs squirming in the aquarium. "Ugly little fuckers. Couldn't we breed the little bastards, create more sea slugs with the, what do you call it, animal husbandry?" "Perhaps in time, but very slow process, much experimentation, maybe years. Better is to increase individual sea slug production of mutagen of Adam. This can be done more quickly if we use host." "A host? Maybe we can hijack a ship, send you down the sailors.
We try, adults already. 2 subjects. They sickened and died, screaming, very noisy, irritating. One of them reached to me.
She looked in wonder at her hand.
Tried to hold on to my hand, begging to take it out of me, but children. It likes to be in children. The sea slug is happy there.
It's happy in children. Well, how's that work exactly?
We implant sea slug in lining of children's stomach. The sea slug bonds with the cells, becomes symbiotic with human host. After host feeds, we induce regurgitation, and then we have 20-30 times more yield of usable atom.
And how do you know it works so good on kids? Dr. Suchong answered him as he pushed a gurney into the room.
Suchong and Tenenbaum experiment on this child.
Stretched out on the gurney was what appeared to be a sleeping child, a rather ordinary little white girl, strapped to the wheeled hospital bed. She was perhaps 6 years old. Her eyes opened. She looked at him sleepily, gave him a distant, fuzzy smile. Drugged. Where the hell did you get that kid?
Child was sick, Tenenbaum said. Brain tumor. We tell parents maybe we heal. We implant sea slug in her abdomen inside. It cures her tumor. We keep her tranquilized. She talks in her mind to sea slug.
As if in response, the little girl lifted a hand and touched her own belly caressingly.
Yes, she will be productive.
You intend to use this child to create a new plasmid base? Fontaine shook his head. 1 child. Will it be enough? The market is exploding. People are going wild for the stuff. I was gonna start major marketing, stores, maybe even vending machines.
This is a tester child, Suchong said. We need more, many more. Implant, feed, induce regurgitation, much mutagen produced, much atom. Better if not tranquilized. We must prepare host for this, condition them.
How come it likes children? Fontaine asked. He could almost feel a sea slug squirming in his own belly. Sheer imagination, but the thought nauseated him.
Tenenbaum shrugged. Child stem cells more malleable, more responsive. They bond with the sea slug. We need children, Frank, many children.
Fontaine snorted. And where are we supposed to get those? From a mail-order catalog? Dr. Suchong frowned and shook his head. Suchong has not seen such catalog. Not needed. 2 children available already. Orphan girls, Babcock twins. They stay with people in Artemis suites. Their parents died. Both parents killed by plasmid attack. And they are girls the right age. Perfect. We pay to bring them here. Okay, they've got to be kids, but why girls? Fontaine asked. People are even more protective about little girls.
Tenenbaum winced and turned back to the microscope, muttering, For some reason, girls take sea slug implant better than boys.
Fontaine wondered what little boy they'd experimented on to determine that, and what had become of him, but he didn't really care. He didn't. And in fact, there was one place that could supply children for all sorts of things. So just girls, eh? That's okay. One less bathroom to build in the orphanage.
Orphanage? Tenenbaum blinked in puzzlement. There is an orphanage in Rapture.
Fontaine grinned. Nah, but there will be. You just gave me the idea with this thing about the Babcock orphans. I'll donate the money for the orphanage. Yeah, the Little Sisters Orphanage. We'll get our adorable little plasmid farms, and we'll train them up right. Now we've got to do this soon. I've got more orders for plasmids than I can fill for a year.
Something about the idea energized him. He felt a kind of shudder, almost a release go through him as he thought about it. Orphanages. Like where he'd grown up. Orphanages leading to money, and money leading to power.
Money and power, Bridget. Money and power. It's all right there. Low-hanging fruit for the plucking. in a gatherer's garden. He heard the door open and turned to see his bodyguard come in, grimacing. He'd left Reggie standing at the door outside Fontaine Futuristics. Now his hand was clasping his right bicep, blood streaming from his fingers.
Say, anybody got any bandages here?
Reggie. Fontaine stepped to the door, looking down the concourse. Saw no one. What happened? You hurt bad? Suchong was already methodically sponging off the wound on Reggie's arm. Ouch. Oh, I'm not hurt bad. But I'll tell you what. Somebody shot at me. Kind of at random, seemed like. The prick. I shot back, but I think I missed him. He took off. Shot at you? You mean a constable? Fontaine asked. Don't think so. I wasn't doing anything to make a constable shoot at me. And he didn't have a badge. Loopy-looking plasmid head with a pistol. Spots all over his face. It's been like this lately. Random shooting. Ryan started putting in those security turrets to keep these guys in check. You'll want to get one of those babies for this place. Camera with a machine gun. Picks out targets. I don't know how it... Ouch, Doc. Shit. Suchong is so sorry, Dr. Suchong said, not sounding sorry, as he wound a bandage tightly around the wound. Like I was saying, I don't know how the turret thing keeps from killing the wrong people. All I know is, on and off, all day, there's been gunfire. Plasmids. That's the reason I don't use that stuff. I don't like firing my gun without a goddamn reason. He winced again. Waste of good bullets. Andrew Ryan's office, 1955. Andrew Ryan was standing at the window, looking broodingly out at the lights of Rapture, shimmering through the ocean, thinking, steps will have to be taken. I have tolerated too much.
You wanted to see Poole?
Sullivan asked, coming in with the rat-like reporter. Ryan nodded and sat at his desk. Stanley Poole and Sullivan sat across from him. Well, Poole, what's your report about this Topside character? People are talking about him as if he's a hero, but he's an outsider, as I understand it. Sullivan frowned.
I could have got you the dirt on him, Mr. Ryan.
I know, Chief, but your men are sometimes too obvious. Poole here has a strange gift for being ignored. Well, Poole? Stanley Poole licked his lips nervously. Yes, sir. Well, near as I can find out, the guy they're calling Johnny Topside, he's a deep-sea diver. There was some snoopers out here, you remember. Our subs made sure they stopped snooping. When they went missing, why, he came out to see what was going on. Went down at the main lighthouse and found the way in. One of the airlocks, I guess. People are pretty impressed with him, making his way here. Acts like he's on his own, just wants the help. He's asking about missing girls. Seems like... Is he? What is his real name? I'm sorry. He's being cagey about that. Seems like he prefers an alias. Changes them around. Sounds like a secret agent type to me. G-Man is what I figure. Hell, how do you get all the info on the boats missing in this area? You know, all that stuff. If you didn't have connections. Ryan pinched the bridge of his nose. He was having small, annoying headaches more and more often. Hearing that there might be a government agent in Rapture made his head redouble its throbbing. You got anything on him, Chief? Sullivan shook his head.
Same impression. I haven't found out his name either. Easy enough to do. I can take him over to the new facility.
Ryan snapped his fingers. Precisely what I had in mind. He's an outsider. Who knows who he's affiliated with? We cannot let a random outsider wander about in here, asking questions. Arrest him immediately, Sullivan. And while you're at it, bring in that wretched lamb woman. Poole here reports she may be connected to our confetti bomber. I've had enough of her Marxist babbling. She's turned half the maintenance workers against me.
You want her charged with something?
Sullivan asked. No, I want her to simply disappear into Persephone. Let her followers feel abandoned. Sullivan nodded.
You got it, Mr. Ryan.
Lamb's got a daughter, Poole pointed out. Girl named Eleanor. Does she? Well, find a home for the girl, Sullivan. Poole shrugged. That colored woman, Grace Holloway, looks after her sometimes. She'll take the kid. Fine, Ryan said with a dismissive wave. Let her take the kid, for now. The child may be of use later. Apollo Square, 1955.
Spider splicers. That's what they are.
Greavy said. Spider what? Bill asked.
Splicers, Bill.
Reuben Greavy repeated.
Splicers. That's the common term for real plasmid addicts.
Fascinated, Bill watched the two splicers, a man and a woman, moving on all fours along the sides of a tram car. They were crawling on the wall like bugs, defying gravity.
See my share plasmid users,
Bill allowed.
But this, sticking to things like bloody bugs, going too far. Maybe.
Going too far is the splicer way,
Greavy said dryly.
They all go rogue in time. They've gotten obsessed, this bunch. They're all about their plasmid splicing, injecting Fontaine's mutagens, looking for E to activate it.
Bill McDonough and Reuben Greavy were standing by the tram tracks in Apollo Square, watching the tram go by. Adhering like geckos to the metal sides of the slowly moving trams, the spider splicer couple was ordinarily dressed, but their heads and cheeks were knobbed with ugly reddish welts, growths from abusing Adam and Eve. Shifting his heavy toolbox from his left hand to his right, Bill reflected on how tempting plasmids were. He could use that wall climbing power for getting to difficult to fix places in Rapture. He could use that new telekinesis plasmid to move objects around, adding an extra pair of invisible hands to a job. One man could do the work it would normally take three to do, but Bill knew better. Some could take them and stay more or less sane for a while, but keep taking them, and you eventually went barking mad. He watched as the male spider splicer grinned clownishly into the tram car from its roof, head dipping to stare upside down in a window, leering at the passengers cringing back from him.
You lovely snuggly ducks,
he yelled hoarsely.
You little chocolates in this chocolate box of steel.
He cackled something more that Bill couldn't hear as the tram trundled away from him and Greavy, but he could see the giggling woman reaching in through a window, clutching for someone's arm. A gunshot cracked from inside the tram, and smoke drifted out the open window as the female spider splicer jerked her arm back. She screeched in pain and fury, and her splicer partner fired his own gun into the window while clinging upside down. Then the tram car slipped from sight beyond the kiosks. Bill sighed and shook his head.
How do they ever loving bloody minds they are?
Yes, I suppose so,
Greavy said thoughtfully.
But I think of it as part of a Darwinian process, this madness, these side effects. They'll die of it, eventually, fighting each other, perhaps. A possibly necessary winnowing in Rapture. Ryan and I knew something of this sort would come, some vector of purging. Eventually, plasmids will be developed with fewer side effects. These early users are like guinea pigs.
Bill glanced at Greavy. He never liked the man much, and that sort of comment was one of the reasons.
We'd best get to that inspection. You think we should call the constables about that gunfight?
Greavy shrugged.
There are so many gunfights now, so much antagonism. The constables can't deal with most of it. Ryan's attitude is that if two consenting adults want to duel, let them.
Troubled, Bill led the way across the tracks and down a short stairway. Workers hoisted a big sign into place at the entrance to a new institution built into a leased space. The sign, with silvery metal lettering, read, Fontaine's Center for the Poor. Framing the lettering was a relief sculpture, one on each side, of hands reaching down to pull the other hands upward.
Never thought I'd see that in Rapture,
Bill muttered as they paused to watch.
A charity?
Shouldn't be here at all, Greavy said, frowning. Just makes things worse. Charity trains people to be dependent. It's like the natural order of things for people to strive and fail. For a good number of them, they fall by the wayside and, just die. Fontaine's Center for the Poor.
What's that a front for?
Anybody else, I'd give him the benefit of the doubt,
Bill said.
With Fontaine,
I've got to wonder what that bastard's up to.
Politics, Greavy murmured.
Political allies, maybe his own little army, the army of the poor.
He'll have no shortage of poor to draw on, Bill said as they moved off. Artemis Suites and Pauper's Drop are stuffed with blokes out of work, and if they work, they still feel crowded and underpaid. Not everyone can start their own business, and if they do, who'll clean the toilets?
You know where Fontaine gets the money for that charity?
Asked Greavy with rhetorical pompousness.
From selling Adam. And why are a lot of the poor impoverished? Because they're addicted to Adam. They're spending all their money on it.
They walked to the nearest wall, not far from the entrance to an apartment complex, and almost immediately Bill felt cold water dripping on his head. He looked up, saw the discoloration high on the wall where it met the big, heavy-framed windows arching over the room. Several stories up, he admired the Wales brothers' vision, building big public spaces like this one. The high glassed ceiling eased the sense of confinement, gave people access to something like sky. Infused by light filtering green-blue from the surface, the sea was directly overhead. The windows curved down to meet the walls, and through the glass near the ceiling was a rippling vista of other Rapture buildings. Light streaming up their towering facades, neon signs blinking. Another drop of water fell from the ceiling and splashed his shoulder.
Pressure crack?
Bill guessed.
From the look of the puddle, it's been here a while. Wish I could climb walls like those spider splicer bastards, get a closer look. Well, I think we'll have a team go out in the diving suits, apply some sealant, then we'll see if...
He broke off, staring, as a wrench floated up from his toolkit, as if weightless, and bobbed in the air in front of him.
What the bloody hell is that?
The floating wrench suddenly darted at his head, and only good reflexes and a quick duck saved Bill from being struck down. The tool flashed by him, and he turned to see it spinning along, stopping in midair, turning to swish viciously at him again.
What the blue blazes?
Bill grabbed the wrench with his left hand, bruising his palm. It seemed to jump about in his hand, like a live but rigid metal flesh, before it simply stopped.
Who's chucking tools at me? There's your tool, chucker,
Greavy said, grimly amused, pointing at a woman about 10 yards away, standing by the doorway into Artemis Suites. She was a petite, smirking, waif-like woman in black pedal pushers and a ragged, blood-spattered blouse. The left sleeve ripped entirely away, her left arm scratched and bloody. She wore coal smeared around her eyes so they looked like a panda's, and her bleached hair was teased up over her head, almost writhing around like Medusa's snakes. Bill supposed a side effect of the telekinetic plasmid she was using was affecting her hair. One side of her face was striped with red welts. Her eyes had the demented glimmer of the hardcore plasmid user. She was crazily stoned. Her eyes had the demented glimmer of the hardcore plasmid user. She was crazily stoned. She raised a grimy hand and pointed it at his toolkit, which jerked from his hand and spun away from him, scattering its contents around the room. People dodged out of the way of flying tools, now under the control of her telekinetic powers.
"Hey you! Stop throwing your tools!"
shouted a glaring, bald-headed constable in a checked suit, stalking towards Bill. A star-shaped badge was pinned to his chest.
"It isn't me," he yelled back. "It's Constable, it's the Splicer, over at Artemis."
The constable turned to look, reaching into his coat pocket for a gun. But as soon as he did, his badge tore itself off his coat, spun around his head, and then buried itself between his eyes. The constable screamed in agony and fell to his knees, clutching at his blood-spurting forehead.
"That'll show you, pricks,"
the little female splicer screeched, pointing a finger at Bill and Greavy.
"I saw you poking around here, you official types, Ryan's little puppets. Well, we don't want you around Artemis, or your bald-headed cops neither."
She made a sudden gesture, and his tools scattered across the intervening floor, leapt into the air, and came spinning at him. Bill threw himself flat as they flashed over him. Greavy shrieked, and Bill turned to see a screwdriver driven through Greavy's chest, the screwdriver blade dripping crimson. Greavy wobbled.
"Jesus, Greavy!"
Bill got to his feet just in time to catch Greavy as he fell, lowering the man's quivering body to the floor. Greavy was sputtering, dribbling blood, his eyes glazing, dying. Maybe if they could get some Adam in him, they could heal him, but there was no time. In moments, Greavy was dead. Bill looked in shock over at Artemis Suites, but the telekinetic splicer was gone. He heard someone cackling from the shadowy corners of the ceiling, and then an announcement echoed from the public address system. Diane McClintock's recorded voice.
Remember that here in Rapture, we're all individuals, but we're also a part of the great chain, welded together by the free market. We are becoming one happy family.
Andrew Ryan's office, 1955.
Mr. Ryan, something I've got to ask about.
Bill McDonough was nervous, demanding an explanation from Andrew Ryan. He had countless other things to do, but he was too troubled to work until he cleared things up. Worry, burning like an acid stomach, had been building up in him. "Yes, Bill," Ryan said, looking up from a small box of audio tapes, seeming only vaguely curious about Bill's errand. He was at his desk, sorting through labeled recordings of his speeches and debates. An AccuVox recorder was set up beside the box. Ryan was wearing a caramel-colored double-breasted suit and a blue tie. Bill wondered how he could function in a buttoned-up suit all day long.
Mr. Ryan, I've got to keep the heat evenly circulating in Rapture. I've got to keep the pipes from freezing. I've got to be able to control water pressure, part of the engineering of this place. I can't do it when there's a big drain, a sudden drop in heat and pressure, and it comes all unpredictable like, and no one let me inspect the source of it.
Ryan set the box aside. "Come to the point. What does this enigmatic monologue refer to?"
There's a whole section of Rapture I'm not even allowed in now. Sinclair's got his own people running a place he's calling Persephone. I knew they were building something, but I thought it was a hotel, only it's too secretive for that. I can't be responsible for hydraulic engineering when a whole section of the city is sealed off from me. Seems like it's been functional for a long time, more than a year, and it's no hotel.
Depends on what you mean by a hotel. Persephone, yes. I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Ryan leaned back in his chair, looking at the ceiling as if something were written up there. "Bill, have you heard my debates with Sophia Lamb?"
Only caught a minute or two. Kinda surprised me when you debated her.
Ryan smiled ruefully at him. "I took a risk, elevating that malcontent in that way. My instinct was simply to have her arrested as a social saboteur, but I advocate freedom. I don't wish to be a hypocrite, and I didn't wish to make her a martyr, so I thought I'd let the people hear the sort of nonsense she spouts when I'm there to refute it. Listen." He pressed a button on the tape recorder. Bill heard Ryan's voice. "Religious rights, Doctor. You are free to kneel before whatever tribal fetish you favor in the comfort of your own home, but in Rapture, liberty is our only law. A man's only duty is to himself. To imply otherwise, therefore, is criminal." Lamb replied,
Ask yourself, Andrew, what is your great chain of progress but a faith? The chain is a symbol for an irrational force guiding us towards ascension, no less mystic than the crucifixes you seize and burn.
Bill nodded. It bothered him too, when Ryan seized religious artifacts. He wasn't religious, but a man ought to be able to believe in whatever he liked. Ryan hit fast forward and then play. Lamb's voice again.
Dream, delusion, or the pain of a phantom limb. To one man they are as real as rain. Reality is consensus, and the people are losing faith. Take a walk, Andrew. It's raining in Rapture, and you have simply chosen not to notice.
Ryan stopped the tape and snorted. Quite the little extemporaneous speaker, isn't she? If you pause it, it makes no sense, but its real message can be decoded, Bill. Reality is consensus. The people are losing faith. What is that but a Marxist notion, and this business of claiming I ignore the suffering in Rapture? He shook his head grimly. I don't ignore it, but I must accept it as part of the long, weary march of evolution.
The surface world is still with us here. To die to the habit of parasitism comes hard, Bill, and some fall by the wayside in that long, lonely march. I know that full well, but what does she do? She makes me sound like Louis XIV. Next she'll imply Diane is Marie Antoinette, and she'll call for the guillotine. Do you expect me to stand by and let that happen?
What's all that got to do with Persephone, Gov? Bill asked. He suspected he knew. He'd heard rumors, but he wanted it spelled out. Ryan looked Bill in the eye. The look was almost one of defiance, though Ryan was boss here.
That's where Sophia Lamb was taken not long ago, Bill, and incarcerated.
Incarcerated?
Yes, you must have noticed her absence from the scene. That glib, sanctimonious woman can make all the speeches she likes in the walls of her cell.
But won't that make her a martyr?
As far as her followers know, she simply disappeared, deserted them.
Bill shook his head sadly. Ought to be another way, Mr. Ryan.
I can't allow this social sabotage to go on.
Ryan aimed an index finger at Bill.
Do you know who planted that charming little confetti bomb with its warnings? Oh, I found out, Bill.
He slapped the top of his desk.
It was done by an agent of Sophia Lamb. Stanley Pools infiltrated her little circle. He heard it was one of our own people who planted the thing. Quite likely, Simon Wales.
Wales?
Oh yes, at Lamb's behest.
Well, why not prosecute her for that? A bomb's a bomb. It was vandalism at least, but this just disappearing people.
Her public prosecution would become a cause celeb. Anyway, we haven't got solid proof, just hearsay, but think about it. How like a psychiatrist to create a bomb that blows nothing up, except our sense of security. Not long after she got here, she started her little game, pulling the pins out from under us, one by one. Do you know what she did with the bonus money I paid her? She took that, and a great many donations from her followers, and built that smarmy Dionysus Park, named in some bizarre effort, as a mockery.
Dionysus Park? Bill scratched his head. He'd only been there once to check the drainage. Thought it was some kind of retreat, therapeutic art, something like that.
Oh, yes.
Ryan's voice dripped with cynicism as he went on.
A retreat. Her sheep-like followers, closeted with Sophia Lamb in her precious garden and her own cinema. Just the setting for Marxist propaganda disguised as therapy and art. Rapture is a powder keg, Bill. I knew that when Reuben Greevey died. Plasmids made Rapture unstable. We can't remove plasmids, not now, but we can remove some of the instability. Lamb, people like her, they have to be stopped.
Bill wondered exactly what happened to the incarcerated in Persephone. Wasn't Persephone a name from a myth about hell? Ryan went on, gesturing at the AccuVox.
I recorded a note to you about all this, but I may as well talk it straight out with you instead. You remember when you spoke of a marketplace of ideas? That was you. I liked the phrase, so I let Lamb enter the marketplace, tried to defang her in debates, but she is too dangerous to be allowed to roam freely. You know the place they're calling Papa's Drop? You've been to the limo room.
Not me, too much a hole in the wall.
Good, because Grace Holloway was singing protest songs there. Perfectly harmless colored lady was Grace, till Lamb got hold of her, and between their protest screeches, these Oblomovs hand out Lamb's manifesto. Lamb adorns every wall there. Saint Lamb, you made her, McDonough.
Me?
You, with your marketplace of ideas talk, you persuaded me to allow her sort. Now, I want you to talk to the council about this. They must accept that people like this are to be silenced.
I can't do that, Mr. Ryan. It's not my place.
I need to know how you really feel, Bill. That'll show me where you stand.
But incarceration, this place, Persephone, what exactly is it?
I should have let you in on it. Quite a while back, I did a deal with Augustus Sinclair to build it. It's out of the edge of Rapture, right over that big crevice, just in case.
It's a facility for isolation and interrogation. Something between a mental hospital and a penal institution for political enemies of Rapture. He was busying himself with tapes, seeming embarrassed. Some of this woman's followers are free and some aren't. We'll find them in time and they'll have their own little cells. There are various shades of malcontents in Persephone. He seemed to realize that he was fussing mindlessly with the tapes and put the box aside. As for water pressure issues, I'll have Sinclair speak to you, give you reports on all that. He has a maintenance crew to deal with any internal problems of that kind.
He doesn't want me to go there, Bill realized. He doesn't want me to see what it's like.
Something else occurred to Bill then. There was a chance, after all, he could see the inside of Persephone. As a prisoner. It could happen if he said the wrong thing. That's what it was coming to in Rapture, and he couldn't risk getting put away, not with Elaine and his little girl needing him. Bill let out a long, slow breath to calm himself. When things cooled down, maybe he could persuade Ryan to close Persephone.
Okay, Mr. Ryan,
he said, keeping his voice as steady as he could.
I reckon you know best.
Persephone Penal Colony, 1955. Simon Wales felt a powerful mingling of superstitious awe and pride as the guard led him into Sophia Lamb's cell. She was waiting for him on her neatly made bunk, sitting up straight, hands folded in her lap, her blonde hair back in a bun. She looked thin, hollow-eyed, but the transcendent spark was there.
So, you did come,
she said softly.
How'd you arrange it?
Wales had to take a breath to calm himself before he replied. He viewed this woman as ascending from the locus of universal love. It was like being with the radiant Joan of Arc as she waited for the stake. I have some terms of friendship with Sinclair, since Daniel and I were the chief architects of Rapture. I convinced him to let me inspect the structure here, to see if it was putting strain on the rest of Rapture. All a blind, of course. He allowed it, and then it was simply a matter of bribing the guards.
Good. You must see to it that the guards will let you in whenever you come. Pay them whatever you must. They fear Sullivan and Ryan. They cannot be induced to simply let me go, but they can be persuaded to let me talk freely with the other inmates.
She frowned. He could see emotional pain flicker across her face, quickly suppressed.
What about Eleanor? Any word?
They have her in some kind of conditioning. She grimaced.
Well, they will think she is one thing, but I have buried her true mission deeply inside her. Eleanor will survive, and she will surprise them. She will surprise everyone here. I have faith in that.
She glanced at the door.
I'm developing a therapeutic relationship with Nigel Weir.
Wales looked at her in surprise. Weir? The warden of Persephone? He let you? She smiled.
He's a sad, disturbed little man. Under pretense of interrogating me, he asked me about himself. Indirectly, you see. I turned the interrogation back on him. We even looked at his files together. I think I've persuaded him to let me do some experimenting and therapy on the prisoners in Persephone. He'll convince Sinclair it's all for the benefits of Ryan's little fiefdom, but in time, I plan to organize a rebellion here, one which they will never expect. They're foolish, putting so many political prisoners in one facility. It plays into our hands.
Gazing at her, Wales felt dizzy. He suddenly, uncontrollably, went to his knees. Ma'am, or Sophia, how is it that I was ever loyal to Ryan, that I let him blind me?
She smiled. It's all right, Simon. The ego is powerful. The will to love is weak at first. It must be strengthened with sacrifice to the collective. It takes time. but you were one of the first to see the light. You are beloved to me, Simon Wales, and in good time, Ryan will fall, and we will be waiting to take his place. Rapture will be ours. Tell them, tell everyone. I will be watching. I will know who is a slave to ego, and who ascends to the body with the blessed.
Yes, Sophia. I'll see that your flock grows. Sophia Lamb put a hand on his head in benediction. Wales felt an orgasmic shudder go through him at her touch, and he lowered his head and wept with joy.